Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, August 8th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, Israel's latest plans for Gaza, plus what Trump's new religion memo for federal workers means, and have free returns gone too far? Israel's political security cabinet approved a plan earlier today to take control of Gaza City as the country expands its military operations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday that Israel intended to take military control of the entire Gaza Strip. But the plan approved today focused specifically on Gaza City. Netanyahu told Fox News this week that Israel intends to take over the entire enclave, but he said Israel wanted to hand over the territory to Arab forces that would govern it. He did not elaborate on what that arrangement would look like. President Donald Trump said yesterday that he's nominating Steven Mnuchin, who chairs the White House's Council of Economic Advisors, to temporarily fill a vacancy on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. The move helps Trump shape interest rate policy during a fraught period. A temporary appointment on the Fed's board might not typically draw much attention. But for months, Trump has badgered Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates, calling him a slew of names in the process. Powell has said officials are waiting to see how much Trump's historically high tariffs push up inflation before resuming a rate-cutting campaign that has been on pause since December. But after a dismal July jobs report, several Fed policymakers suggested they favor a rate cut next month. The Trump administration issued a memo late last month outlining to federal employees the types of religious expression allowed in the workplace. I spoke with USA Today First Amendment reporting fellow Brianna Frank to learn more about what the memo means. Brianna, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So just starting here, what was this memo issued by the Trump administration last month?
So Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Cooper issued this government-wide memo on July 28th that really underscores the rights that federal employees have to express their religion in the workplace.
And I guess, Brianna, there are some similarities here with prior administrations, right?
In many ways, it's very similar. One of the aspects of the memo that made headlines was a part where it mentions that employees can try to persuade their colleagues about why their religious beliefs are better, why their colleagues should rethink their existing beliefs. But that type of language was actually included in a 1997 memo under President Bill Clinton's administration.
All right, so we'll get to some of the worries from critics here in a second, Brianna, but what do supporters of this memo and what it entails say?
The administration and supporters who I talked to say that this is just a continuation of President Trump's stated desire of, quote, bringing religion back to our country. Alliance Defending Freedom, a very influential legal organization that has supported President Trump's administration, called it a critical step in restoring what it characterizes as a loss of religious influence in the government. And others also indicated that even if some of the language in this memo is similar, they felt that President Trump would enforce these policies in different ways than previous administrations.
All right, well, what do critics worry about principally? What did you hear in reporting this piece?
One of the differences that some experts pointed out as it relates to this memo is that it doesn't spend as much time as the 1997 memo in talking about the risks that are associated with religious expression in the workplace. So, for example, the new memo talks about a supervisor having the ability to invite his or her employees to an Easter service. And experts told me that even if there's not an explicit directive to go to a service, the power dynamics that are at play in those interactions could still make the employee feel pressured to accept them. Another thing they pointed out was that the memo only gives examples from Jewish and Christian traditions, whereas the 1997 memo also mentions Muslims and Buddhists. And so they are worried that though the memo says it's for religious freedom more broadly, they're worried that its enforcement could vary depending on the faith tradition.
What else have we seen from President Trump when it comes to religious liberty? And is this memo in line with some of these previous moves we've seen from him?
It's definitely in line. Shortly after President Trump entered office, he issued an executive order calling for federal agencies to help with, quote, eradicating anti-Christian bias. He then established the White House Faith Office and the Religious Liberty Commission. And the Religious Liberty Commission had its first meeting a couple of months ago. And in that meeting, there was very much a theme of, in their view, religion being under attack in the United States in recent years, and a sense that President Trump needed to take corrective action because of that.
Well, Brianna, as someone who covers the First Amendment principally, I do want to get your sense a little bit on just kind of how this has moved through the courts. How has the Supreme Court tackled religious liberty in the Trump era?
There have been several really important religious liberty cases at the Supreme Court recently. Some of them that the court decided this summer were blockbuster cases, though their outcomes might not have had as large of an impact as some thought they would have. So they had a case that could have established the nation's first religious charter school, and the court ended up deadlocking on that because Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself. They did, however, in June rule in favor of a group of Maryland parents who wanted to opt their children out from reading books with LGBTQ themes in public schools. So religious liberty has certainly been on the court's docket in recent years.
So, in terms of what's next here, might the courts need to weigh in on this as it pertains to this memo as well?
It's certainly possible that this will end up in court. I haven't heard anything yet along those lines, but this memo was only issued last month. Again, some experts are concerned that the enforcement of these policies could vary by religious traditions. So I guess we'll see if a federal employee has an incident that they want to take to court.
All right. Brianna Frank is a reporting fellow covering the First Amendment for USA Today. Thanks, Brianna.
Thanks for having me.
The National Weather Service has taken steps to begin filling some of the more than 550 positions left vacant by federal cutbacks and early retirements since Inauguration Day. Earlier in the summer, the agency received an emergency hiring exemption to fill 126 of its vacant positions and has begun to post those jobs on usajobs.gov. But in an all-hands meeting on Monday, Weather Service employees learned the agency has since received permission to hire a total of 450 people by September of next year, according to two longtime Weather Service veterans who retired earlier this year. The mass exodus of workers this winter and spring, as the Trump administration aimed to shrink the federal budget, had prompted widespread concern across the Weather Service staff, many members of Congress, and the broader weather forecasting community. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Shoppers are using everything from jewelry to power tools, then returning them for a full refund. Could stores start cracking down? I spoke with USA Today senior reporter Jessica Gwynn for more. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on. So let's just start by talking through the history here a little bit. How did lenient return policies catch on?
Well, liberal return policies actually date back centuries. Back in the 1700s, there was this innovative small town English potter, Josiah Wedgwood, who used a money back guarantee to lure customers and goose sales in a fine china market. About a century later in Chicago, businessman Potter Palmer used to encourage his fancy customers at his dry goods store in Chicago. Marshall Field, who took over the department store chain from Palmer, carried on that legacy with a no questions asked return policy that was then widely imitated by Sears, JCPenney, and later Walmart. But it was really the advent of internet shopping that drove a whole new era of easy and free returns, as you had all these e-commerce companies suddenly jockeying for your hard-earned dollars. And those policies in turn force many brick and mortar retailers to follow suit. And broadly speaking, retailers today still have pretty lax return policies. Of course, none more so than Costco, which gives its paying members an almost unlimited grace period to return most items.
We mentioned these policies today, Jessica. I mean, how are customers taking advantage these days?
We called it the buy now, return later mindset. We've all heard of people who buy a fancy getup for a black tie event with the intent of returning it after they wear it. Well, these days people buy and return all kinds of things, from really extravagant Halloween and Christmas decor to American flags after the 4th of July. Basically, we're talking everything: snow blowers after the last winter storm, portable generators after hurricane season, air conditioning units after a heat wave. And we talked to Costco employees who have to process a lot of these returns, and they said they've seen massage guns after a customer worked out that muscle knot. And there was even a customer who returned a fully assembled gingerbread house because it didn't look good. People in the retail industry have taken to calling this weekend rentals. Shoppers are basically renting stuff for free. And it's gotten so bad that some people call Home Depot Rent a Depot or Returns Depot.
Yeah, I was laughing just reading along this list of items, a wide range that you outline here in this piece, Jessica. Just how big a headache is this for retailers, and does it actually impact their bottom line?
Well, shoppers who abuse these policies often excuse their behavior as like, oh, I never do this, or hey, I would be a dummy not to do this because everyone else is. And they don't really see the harm in cheating a megabucks corporation. But the reality is that many of these returns end up in landfills or in liquidation centers, and they also present a really costly problem for the retail industry. An industry group estimated that overall returns would reach $890 billion in 2024. And retailers estimated that nearly 17% of all the stuff they sell will get returned. And weekend rentals are a growing part of these returns.
So that's the retailers themselves. I mean, how does this impact vendors, Jessica?
Well, the fact of the matter is that big box stores are not the only ones who are harmed by this practice. The vendors who supply the products to Costco or Home Depot often are the ones that end up footing the bill. They have to eat the sales, but they also have to pay to have those returned items shipped back to them, as well as a bunch of other associated costs. And those return rates can run as high as 20% or more, depending on the product.
Why don't retailers just stop these lax return policies, and could a return crackdown be coming?
Well, as the expenses associated with returns have taken a toll, retailers have been tightening policies. They're narrowing return windows, they're adding restocking fees, they're adding shipping fees. And they're doing all of this to discourage this kind of bad behavior. But what they don't want it to discourage is people making the purchase in the first place. So it's a real balancing act. But industry experts did tell us that fraudulent returns like these will ultimately lead to more restrictive return policies for everyone.
All right. Interesting piece. Jessica Gwynn is a senior reporter with USA Today. Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Taylor.
It's International Cat Day, and USA Today has pulled together a gallery of cat pictures and stories. The day was created by the International Fund for Animal Welfare to help raise awareness about cat welfare and promote responsible pet ownership. So whether you're Team Tabby or all about those toe beans, give your favorite feline some extra love. To see photos of USA Today's cats and more pet stories, check out the link in our show notes. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green and Kelly Monahan, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and as always, you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.